Alrighty, so we left off yesterday with tropical forests, I think is where we stopped, and I just realized that we still have grasslands through shrubland to cover. So I'm going to briefly go through these. I'm not going to be doing a reading check on this particular one, just because this is kind of last minute. I'm throwing it in here, but because this content will be on your test next week, I wanted to make sure I did get it covered at some point. So keep that in mind. I had a few people asking also our test right now. I'd initially planned to do it on Wednesday, the 3rd, but I think I'm actually going to move that to Thursday, the 4th. Thursday, the 3rd, instead of Wednesday, the 2nd. Just so that we have one more day to kind of review and cover everything and catch up if we need to. And then Friday of next week, we'll just kind of leave that for makeup tests and catching up on assignments and whatever we need to do, because I don't want to start anything new before Labor Day. So picking up with grasslands, this one should be incredibly self-explanatory. It's just a large open area. It's covered in grass. They are very commonly used for grazing. Their climates, they have not that much rainfall, actually. It's pretty irregular as well. It's not consistent throughout the year. The level of evaporation of water from the soil is pretty high as well, so it stays pretty dry, and it can have extreme temperature differences throughout the year. It's not super consistent. So if you look at the climatogram of this one, you do have that good bell curve for the temperature, but if you look at the precipitation, it's pretty erratic. It's kind of irregular, but the precipitation does seem to somewhat follow the temperature, the average temperature as well, which is interesting. The soil in these areas is actually really fertile. That's a big difference compared to what we talked about yesterday regarding the different forests where their soil is not actually that ideal for growing agriculturally. So the soil is really fertile in these areas. Obviously, with their name, grasslands, they've got mostly grasses. You might find a few small trees here and there, but not super common. And within grasslands, you have, just started raining. Within grasslands, you have the category of savannas. Savannas are grassy plains. These are going to be found in more tropical and subtropical regions. They also, like grasslands as a whole, have very few trees, as you can see there. The animals that you're going to find in these areas can vary depending on what grassland you're looking at. If you're looking at a grassland in the U.S., you're going to find very different animals than if you're looking at a grassland in Africa or a different country. So some examples potentially could be bison, bears, wolves, prairie dogs, things of that nature. Squirrel. I love how squirrel has been on every single biome, I feel like. I think somebody find that out for me. Does every biome have a squirrel? Maybe not the tundra. I don't know. I need to know for science. So you can see you've got your coyote, bison, and a prairie dog that is absolutely precious. We got some bears. I don't know why. We've had the conversation about how I don't love the picture placement in these slideshows, so sorry about that. Some of the adaptations that you're going to find in animals that live in grasslands or savannas are things like long-distance vision, which makes sense, right? Because if you're looking out across the plain, then they need to be able to see from a long distance if a predator is coming. The eyes of grazing mammals especially are above the snout. So even when they've got their head down and they're eating grass, they're still able to keep an eye out and see danger coming from far away, right? Small mammals are generally capable of standing up on their hind legs. So things like weasels or prairie dogs, squirrels, whatever, they can stand up on their hind legs. Again, it's to make sure that they can look out for predators as needed. Pretty good camouflage. That's been a common theme in every biome that we've talked about. Animals have pretty good camouflage for the area. So in the example here, you can see this weasel's head is a lighter color. So if they're sticking their head out of their burrow to check for danger, then the head is not going to be that noticeable because it's that kind of sandy color that would blend in with the environment. They also have reduced motion where they can move super stealthily, but also have the ability to move very, very quickly if necessary to escape predators. a lot of these animals also use underground burrows as well. Since there's not really any trees or rocks or anything like that they can hide in, they're hiding in underground burrows from predators instead. So you can see a squirrel and a lion in these areas. Other adaptations, these animals have to be really strong flyers, right? Which makes sense because it's not like there's just a tree across the road they can hop into. Like, they've got to fly pretty long distances. So they're very strong flyers. A lot of times they will nest in tall grasses instead of trees. And the predatory birds fly super high to have better aerial views of whatever prey items they're trying to catch. When it comes to the human impact on grasslands, it makes sense since we said that the ground there is very fertile. It makes sense that we do have a tendency to convert the grasslands to farmland for agriculture. Overgrazing is also a huge problem where people put their livestock on grasslands and then let them overgraze the area and kind of drown out the natural ecosystem that's supposed to be there. People have a tendency to replace the natural grasses there with domestic ones. And then the farming methods can cause soil erosion. And that is a topic that we're going to talk about once we get into our weathering unit, is soil erosion. So you can see grasslands, but they're replaced. That's not native grass. It's cut shorter, and they're tilling up the land. Also, overgrazing, you can see in these areas, we've got a lot of rocks, we've got a lot of dirt, dead-looking areas where it should be rich grasses, right, from that grassland, but they're letting the herd of cows overgraze it. I'm going to pause for 1 second. All right, picking up after me getting distracted by rain, we've got deserts. Deserts are a biome that you should be fairly familiar with at this point. I would assume that you are. The main characteristic is obviously going to be that there is very, very little rainfall. Subtropical desert locations are generally between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south of the equator. They get less than 25 centimeters of rainfall per year. So that is wildly low. Very low humidity, so it's very arid and dry, and very low temperatures at night and very high temperatures during the day. So I think that might or might not be a fun little tidbit that you already know, that deserts get very, very cold at night and very, very hot during the day. The climatogram for this one, you've got the temperature and the rainfall. Notice that the rainfall on this one is almost non-existent. Like, there is hardly anything down there for rainfall. You've got just a little bit on the left and right here, but in the summer months, you've got almost nothing, while temperatures in the summer can get way high, obviously. The soil in the desert is generally rock particles and sand. There is not very much organic matter in it at all. And it may also be hard and sun-baked. So you can see in the picture they've got with it that maybe that was mud at one point, but it has dried and cracked in the sun. Yeah, almost like the bed of like a dried up creek or something. So there are a couple of different types of soil that you can find in the desert. Here they've got hot, dry climate soil from a desert. It can be dry and brown. It can be reddish brown. Just depending on what accumulations of clay, calcium, and carbonate are in there, as well as the soluble salts. They have almost no humus mineral mixture. Remember, we talked about that in the temperate deciduous forest and the tropical rainforest. They have really thick layers of that humus mineral mixture that's very rich in nutrients and whatnot, but this one has almost none. And it's a mosaic of closely packed pebbles and boulders. So if you compare, this one's got it comparing the desert soil to that grassland soil, and the grassland in a semi-arid climate. The grassland soil is alkaline, it's dark, it's rich in humus, and it's got clay and calcium compounds further down. So obviously much better for growth and more plant life. So the vegetation is going to be xerophytes, annuals, succulents, and shrubs. So there is some vegetation here. Not a whole lot, but you got some. Xerophytes are going to be plants that need very, very little water. So they're going to be things that are really good at storing what little water they do get. You've got succulent xerophytes with fleshy stems in this example. A lot of the adaptations you're going to find for plants in the desert would be pretty obvious, right? It's probably stuff you would already assume. Plant tissues of plants in the desert, or xerophytes, are very, very good at holding water, because if they get any water at all, they need to hold on to it for as long as they can, because who knows when they're going to get rain again, right? The seeds remain dormant, but they can germinate and grow quickly when water is available. So seeds might sit out in the desert for months and not grow, but then as soon as they get a good rain, that's when they are going to grow. So they really take advantage of the rain when they can. There are fewer leaves. The leaves are covered with a cuticle. The plants grow further apart, and the roots are very shallow. And it makes sense that the roots would be shallow, right? Because it said there was hardly any, if any at all, of that humus mineral layer to provide nutrients for those plants. So the roots are pretty shallow, because it's like if you go down deeper, you just get more dirt and rock and sand, and it's not exactly nutritious for them. You do have some trees. You've got cactus and mesquite trees. They have roots that spread pretty far to absorb as much rainwater as they can whenever they get some. Their stems store lots of water, and they have spines to help protect them from being eaten by other animals. Not having leaves, like it says here, not having leaves on the plants definitely does help, because if you had a bunch of leaves, they would allow water to be evaporated a lot more quickly. So here you just got the breakdown between acacia trees, cacti, things like that, and how those roots really spread out. For some of these trees, their taproot goes so deep that it actually ends up hitting the groundwater. So animals that you're going to find in desert climates are going to be somewhat obvious. Some you might not expect. You've got camels, snakes, foxes, birds, jackrabbits, armadillos, lizards. You can't see it. The formatting's bad on this one because it converted from slides to PowerPoint. But lizards, wild horses, and wild dogs. Thinking about that jackrabbit, actually, I think we're probably going to talk about that momentarily. Let me hold off in case we do. But some examples. You've got little bearded dragon friend here, dingoes, shrews, and spiny lizards. Got a little rattlesnake guy, good eyebrows on him. Again, the animal adaptations on these are going to be very obvious probably. They're generally nocturnal. So we said that the nights are pretty tolerable. They can even get cold, and the days are incredibly hot. So it makes sense that they would want to come out at night, because they won't, burn up and die. They do tend to burrow, just like in the grasslands. They tend to stay in the shade, and they try to minimize the contact between their bodies and the sand because of the heat. They are adapted to pant or sweat instead of just letting their bodies overheat. That helps them release heat. And the excreted wastes are highly concentrated. So what that means is they might, like reptiles and birds, for example, use urates. They don't have for lack of a better word, they don't have poop and pee like other animals. They just have urates, and they release only what they have to release. And instead of releasing any excess water or liquids, they hold on to those. And in this case, it's so that they can maintain that level of hydration that they need. So we've got a fennec fox and an Arctic fox comparison here. You can see we've got longer legs, we've got shorter fur, bigger ears. Those ears are actually to help him cool off. And then with the Arctic fox, you've obviously got a much thicker coat, smaller ears, smaller arms and legs. And yes, this is what I was about to bring up with the jackrabbit, was that Klein-Allen's rule. So the warmer the climate that the organism is in, the longer their extremities are going to be. So in this case, the Arctic rabbit Arctic hare is much smaller, he's a little chunkier, he has smaller ears, thicker fur, shorter legs. And then when you get over to the desert hare or jackrabbit, you've got much longer arms and legs, a longer tail, the ears are bigger, and it's to help redistribute that heat evenly. So you can see this is kind of a breakdown of the digestive system for various species depending on where they are. So we've got a cow and we've got a desert rat, right? So the desert animals, or animals in more arid and dry conditions, are going to have a juxtamedullary nephron, while the normal conditions are going to have a cortical nephron. So they have less water retention, they release more urine, and a lot of their water evaporates. But when you've got animals who are adapted to a dry climate, they lose a lot to evaporation, and they really, really condense. Like I said a minute ago, they condense their urine and feces water loss by quite a bit. When it comes to the human impact on deserts, people have actually started irrigating and fertilizing them for agricultural purposes. So literally altering the entire, like, all the qualifying characteristics of the biome by putting in irrigation methods, so irrigating water throughout the desert, and fertilizing it for agriculture. So they're trying to farm out there. More and more cities are spreading into the desert, which is going to lead to things like this picture here. You've got pollution and trash and debris out there. And also tourism. People like to post pictures of, driving in a Land Rover across the desert. I don't know why, but they do. So you can see an example here, how much the city is encroaching into the desert. Same here. You've got agriculture. You can see the circles here. That's actually, each one of those is a little plot of farmland that they're making suitable for growing crops or whatever in that area. Mining, tourism, and then using the deserts as an easy place to test explosives as well. All right, I think this is the last one we're going to talk about. We're going to power through it. Lastly, we have the shrubland or chaparral. I like saying shrubland because I've never been confident I'm pronouncing that other word correctly. Shrublands get more rain than grasslands and deserts, but they still get less than forests. So they're kind of an in-between biome. You can see with the climatogram, they do get more rain than the deserts. Very, very little rain at all in the summer here. And the temperature is actually pretty consistent throughout the year. There's not much of a bell curve there. The climate is going to be generally between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Plants are going to be cacti, poison oak, scrub oak, and shrubs. You're going to find things like jackals, lizards, bobcats, cougars, and deer. And you're going to find these in Mexico, these particular biomes in places like Mexico, Europe, and the northern part of Africa. You've also got a little bit down here at the bottom of Australia, the west side of South America, as well as part of the western U.S. So parts of California can be considered shrubland as well. And that is it. We have made it through our biomes. So that will be that. Make sure that you email me if you have any questions or concerns or requests for clarification or whatever it might be. Have a good weekend. Make good choices. And I will talk to you guys on Monday.